the Late Morning Program with Nam Ras podcast.
Hare Krishna, you're listening to the Late Morning Program, the number one Hare Krishna podcast in the world. I'm here with Jiva, who I've never met before, but I'm very honored to meet her today, who is the leader of the creator and the leader of the Bhakti Recovery Group. And I'm just absolutely fascinated by your work. And the reason I just want to give the audience a little bit of background of why I brought Jiva on is that two devotees on separate occasions on the same day messaged me and said, you should have her on. So I thought that was a sign from Krishna to have her on. And I'm so excited to speak to you, Jiva, today.
Haribol, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So usually we just start out with how you got in contact with Krishna consciousness. But before that, your upbringing, where you grew up and how that was, and what kind of led you to spirituality.
Okay, that's a big question.
Yeah.
So I'll do my best to answer that as authentically as I can. I am a New York City kid. I was born and raised in Upper Manhattan, Upper West Side, and both my parents. I come from a Jewish background, non-religious. So religion was not really a topic in my family. I had a pretty rough childhood, I would say. I would say it wasn't very structured. I did not come from a structured family. And I came from really a family of dysfunction. They were very dysfunctional. I mean, they weren't like mean-spirited. They were just dysfunctional. And so I was pretty much emotionally and I would say spiritually on my own. So I just had to kind of figure that all out. And in hindsight, if I'm thinking about all those times, it's really prepared me to have a very deep spiritual longing, because I didn't have much in the material world to keep me safe. I never felt very safe, I would say. So yeah, that's kind of a general,
And then how did you meet? Did you meet devotees, or did you read a book, or how'd that happen?
So when I was 14, around the time when I was 14, I when my parents got divorced, and my mom and my new stepfather moved up to Westchester County, very kind of richy kind of neighborhood, and the whole family just did there, and it was very, very difficult for me to adjust to that kind of life. It was very, very strange for me to be up there. Never felt quite comfortable. And so I was on the weekends. I was in the city every weekend with my dad. And I did not have a good relationship with my mother. She was also very, at the time, very depressed and very busy. She was always busy. She was away. I'm pretty much alone. And believe it or not, our house was haunted. So we lived in a house where there was this famous mass murderer named Albert Fish. I know this is so insane. It's totally.
You lived in that house.
I lived in the house
after him or something.
Well, like he did that in the 1920s, and we lived there in the 1980s. So.
Oh wow. Yeah,
and every family who lived in there went insane. So it's really. And even there I was alone because, I think my parents didn't want to say anything because they didn't want to scare me, but I saw things every night and I heard things every night, and they just told me that I'm imagining it. So this was really bad. But anyway, I just, at that point, by the time I was 13, 14, I just couldn't take it anymore. So I was in the city on the weekend and I was hanging out. I was a punk rocker. And I was hanging out on the Lower East Side. I was 14, and I was at a friend's house. And I just, for the last years, I dreaded on Sunday nights having to go back to Westchester. It was just like going back to, for me, like living hell, dysfunctional family, haunted house, like people teasing me all the time, calling me like freak or whatever it was. And I called my mom and I said, I'm not going to school tomorrow. I'm not coming home to go to school tomorrow. And she just said simply, you either come home and go to school tomorrow, or you just don't come home at all.
Wow.
So I said, great, bye-bye. And I just didn't come home.
Wow.
And and so I just was on the street, Lower East Side, just Tompkins Square Park.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm getting to your question about how I got to Krishna
Sure.
consciousness.
Sure.
Every Saturday, it changed from Saturday to Sunday at one point, but there was like this hardcore matinee. It was at CBGB's, and it was like all ages. It was an afternoon, and above this club, there was a homeless shelter, and the Krishnas would come and serve prasad right in front of CB's. And I got prasad, and everyone would say, don't eat that. Don't eat that food. It's got saltpeter in it. They have stuff to make it so that are, not that you're sterile as a man. I'm like, well, I'm not a man. And I just didn't care what anyone said. And I ate it. I loved it.
Right.
And I got a Bhagavad Gita. I was 13, 14 around that age. And I took it home, and I loved it. I was fascinated with the pictures, fascinated with everything. And I loved the Hare Krishnas. I thought they were so great. And all the devotees were just, I didn't know the language of devotees back then. For me, it was like they were the Hare Krishnas. I didn't know anything else. And I just really found them very empathetic when I first got in contact with the Gita at all. So it just didn't. And I don't know if you know, but did you know there's a lot of kids back then in the hardcore scene? They joined the movement.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
And so I had some friends who would just join the movement. It was just always around me, and Kastuba, he have known each other since I was 13, and he was
Really?
and he was 15, and he like just disappeared from the scene, and then everybody was like, yeah, he's a monk now. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. And I hadn't seen him in so long. I hadn't seen him in years until later, and that comes later in the deal.
Sure.
But he was like the first, and then there was like Eric from the Cro-Mags. He joined, and I remember when he came back from the ashram. I remember it was just the Cro-Mags, that whole thing. That wasn't really my scene of people, but I didn't hang out with them all the time or anything, but it was pretty, it was pretty there in the scene. It was like a part of the hardcore culture, being to Krishna consciousness, and it wasn't the last time I tried to read a Gita, I think throughout my life I did. Mm-hmm. So finally, when how I got into spirituality, I always seeked. I was always I was always seeking something. And I did so many, I looked at so many things and did so many things. And by the time I was, by the time I was 19, I started doing heroin, and I really got messed up. And I spent a lot of years just deep in the clutches of Maya, in the darkest demonic frame of mind that existed in my world, just being, the bondage of self, the bondage of, this addiction, this horrible tamasic addiction, and life didn't make sense anymore. It just didn't make any sense. And I would just wake up and get the drugs. It's a 24-hour job. You wake up, you get the drugs, you hustle, you do this, you do that, and then, then you have the drugs, and that's it. And then it goes on, and you do the same thing over and over every day, every morning.
Where were you living at the time?
Different places. I was in California for a while. I was in Philly for a while. In New York, I constantly tried to run away from myself, tried to run away from my addictions. We call it, like a geographic cure,
Right.
like I'll go to California, and, the bad Jiva is going to stay in New York, and, the good Jiva is going to be, just
right.
Doesn't work out that way. Not really, because no matter where you go, there you are.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I eventually I was in the music scene as well, and I was playing in some bands, and a friend of mine's European tour management came to New York. I would say about 20 at the time, and 21 perhaps. And I just got to know all these Berliners, and they invited me to go to Berlin, and I went to Berlin, and I stayed clean from heroin for like a year, and then I didn't because I came back. And I spent, until I was 28, I would say the last 10 years of my addiction, all I tried to do was stop. So it was a constant fight, a fight of myself, like the battle of like a serious battle, and
Right.
When I moved to so I can explain to you my bottom, because we don't have to go through all the other stuff, but my bottom, that's a really important key.
Sure. Yeah.
So, so I was, all right, let me just rewind. I was clean, then I wasn't. And then I was clean again, and then I got pregnant with my daughter's father. And he was from Berlin, so we were in Berlin, and I had a beautiful baby girl, and I was clean for the first 2 years of her life. And I don't know what it's called in English anymore. When I stopped nursing her, the disease came back. We have this disease, this addiction. I have an addiction, and addictions are very tricky. It's like Maya. It's like right now we're talking about this, or if I'm in temple, or if I'm at a Bhakti Recovery Group meeting, my disease and Maya are doing push-ups right outside the door. So
Wow.
it's really like that. And so it's really important to know that a disease it's not something that just goes away because you wish it away. There's a lot of work to be done. And the work always starts with surrender. So I made a big mess of all of that. The father of my daughter, by the time she was 3, he said, if you don't get clean, then I'm going to take custody, because he found out that I had been relapsing. And so I went to a rehab, and I relapsed, and then he took the custody away. And this was probably one of the most painful times in my life. And I say this now, and you will know why I'm saying this. I'm so grateful for all of this. I'm more than grateful for it ever happened to me. Like Queen Kunti, like the prayers of Queen Kunti. Yeah. And so this was like October, November when that happened. So I spent the holiday seasons on the streets, living here and there, trying to get drugs. My addiction had never been so bad. It was so bad. My addiction had never been that bad. I started introducing cocaine to the mix. So I was shooting up heroin and cocaine. I was needing about $400 or $500 a day just to get through the day.
$400 or $500 a day.
A day.
Wow.
A day.
Amazing. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, it was like serious. I was skin and bones, just a wreck. And, so all this time went by. I was lamenting about losing the custody of my daughter, feeling gut-wrenching guilt and gut-wrenching pain because it was a holiday season. I didn't have my daughter. I didn't, I messed up as a mother. I'm a horrible person, the worst person on earth, worse than anything ever. And just, it was so horrible. And just trying to drink it and drug it away, trying to just forget it because I couldn't change it at the moment. And then he said, and then I got in touch with him one day and he said, look, if you have a few months clean, you can see her again. And that was like the beginning of a motivation for me. And so there was this one day, and I was living in this, like, in Germany, it's a bit better. It's not like in America where if you're screwed, you're on the street. In Germany, you give you like little apartments to stay in and stuff. So I had this little teeny apartment in a really horrible area, but it didn't matter. It was like my little apartment, and I shared it with somebody. And we decided to go out, and I was hungry. I didn't really have any food. So we decided to go to the supermarket, and I stole some cookies. And then the guy who I was staying with, he decided to steal some whiskey so that we could sell it so that we can get drugs. And when we were leaving the store, we got caught. He had his passport. When you steal food in Germany, they don't arrest you. You can just get like a fine. You don't really do that if you can show who you are. But if you don't have any ID, then they take you. Mm-hmm. So they took me because I didn't have my ID with me.
Right.
So I'm in jail, and I'm getting seriously dope sick, which means I'm starting to get this withdrawal, symptoms, shaking, sweating, hurting. And it was like one of those days. It was February. And it was one of those days where it was totally warm, like really warm, literally like 60 degrees. And I just had this like long sleeve t-shirt on and like some little vest. And then by the time I was in jail, they released me. They found out who I was and they released me. It was like the middle of the night and it was snowing. And I couldn't go back to the apartment. Another story. So I went to this place where, now this is, I'm a little reluctant to say all this, but I'm just going to come out and this is my story. And I stick with my story. Right. So there's a place where I used to hustle. And I would, I would prostitute myself at this, on this one specific street. And so I went down there to see if I can get some money, if I can get whatever. And it was dead. No, actually, I have to back up. I forgot one really important part.
Sure.
So I get on the train. I get on the platform and I wait for the train. And I'm like, I got to get to the street. I really got to get something. And this guy was standing on the platform and I asked him for a cigarette. And he was like, yeah, sure. And he gave me a cigarette and I was smoking. The train came right at that moment. And it was like the trains were completely empty. And I was like, I don't care. I'm just going to smoke on the train. So I'm smoking on the train. And some German guy, some weird German guy was like drunk or something. He was like, you can't smoke on the train. And he came up to me like really aggressively. And I'm like, I don't know. I start arguing with him, whatever. And then he just hauls off and smacks me. And I was like, what the heck? And then there was these two other guys on the train and they just jumped up. They're like, hey man, what are you doing? And it was just like this craziness. And my head was, I'm only saying this because if you can understand how my head was at that moment, it was reeling, everything. I just got arrested. I want my daughter back. It's cold. I only have this. I can't go back to the apartment. I've lost my passport. I don't know what's going on. And then this happens and I'm just going out of my mind. And I just the next stop, I just left the train and I walked to that street. And that's when it started to snow. The streets were completely empty. And when I got to the street, I looked down on the street and I stood there. I don't know for how long. And I saw there was like this, it's a very straight street. And then there's all these lights, street lights. And you see all the snow coming in those little, in the rays of the light, you see the snow falling, little flakes falling.
Right. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yes. And the whole street was just frosted, just like lightly frosted with snow. And it was quite beautiful. And I stood there I don't know why I stood there, but I just stood there and I looked and I looked. And at that moment, I knew I can't do this anymore. I just said to myself, this can't be the rest of my life. This just cannot be the rest of my life. I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. I turned around and I went to a phone booth and I made a collect call to my dad in New York. And I said, Dad, I have to come home. I have to get clean. And back then, it wasn't like we didn't have like all this. You had to like book planes and it took about 4 or 5 days. During that 4 or 5 days, I had to find somewhere to go. And so I had friends still, and I could crash here and crash there and do this. But on that one night, I was so ashamed about everything. I couldn't really face any of my old friends because most of my old friends, they don't, they were like, whatever, they would drink their beer or whatever, but they never had anything to do with that. And I never really wanted to bring that kind of lifestyle into theirs. I just separated myself. I'm like one of those animals wounded, I go into the woods. I don't really want to involve any nice people in a mess like that. So, that next morning, and to this day, I don't remember what happened after that or where I went or how I got to where I was going. My next memory that I have is in the morning and I'm in another dope spot, just waiting because I have to wean myself off a little bit before I go to New York. And this random guy comes up to me and he's like, do you need something? And I was like, yeah, but I don't have any money. And he was like, well, if you sell for me, I'll give you something. And I was like, okay. And then we got to talking and then he was like, you are so skinny. It's like it's not healthy. Like you need to eat something. And I was like, okay. And he was like, here. And I was still a vegetarian at the time. So I'm like, he's like, what, you're chunky and a vegetarian? Why are you? But, and so this guy, kind of dodgy, he's a drug dealer. So, I'm figuring like, okay, I'm going to trust this guy. And then he said, where are you going? Then afterwards, I was like, I'm just waiting. And I told him the story. I told him what happened. And I said, I'm waiting for a ticket from my dad. And he said, well, then you can stay with me. And I'm like, yeah, right. What do you want from me for me to stay with you? And he was like, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to give you half of what you usually take. And we're going to put you down and you're not getting any Coke. And I'm just going to, and you don't have to pay for it. You're just going to do it. And I was like, oh God, okay, here we go. Maybe not money, but he wants something else. But it was so funny. He was I don't know, I think from, he was Arab, but I don't know where from. And so I decided for some reason to trust him. And I went back to his apartment. And there was all these guys there. And I got totally scared. I was like, okay, so there's like 6 Arab guys speaking Arabic, sitting on the floor eating. And I was like, oh God, like I'm going to die. And then they said, like, oh, hello, come, welcome, sit. And I was like, okay. And then it turns out they're all students, like going to university. They all live there. Some of them are like cousins, and they were super nice. And they really helped me in those 4 days. They really helped me. They never want anything from me, nothing. And just, they fed me every day. They brought me a falafel every day. Eat this falafel. You're so skinny, go on, eat it. And yeah, and then I flew to New York. And I did the rest of my detox on the couch of my dad's house. And then I started going to NA, Narcotics Anonymous, and Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's where I slowly got into my spiritual life. At first, it was very approachable through physics. So I read things like the Tao of Physics and Dancing Woolly Masters, certain books that were like, you know, quantum physics and spirituality for dummies, right? And so
What interested you about the physics part?
Well, because it was the science, right? It was the science. It was the science, and not the intellectual science. It was the tangible science.
I see.
Even though quantum physics is not really tangible, but it is in a certain way. And I always saw the correlation between certain physics and mathematic numbers, also just with spirituality. It just made sense to me. It just clicked and made a lot of sense.
Right.
So, you know, as it progressed, I became very, very God conscious. And I became very, very, I would say I was very militant about my program. This was in 1997. So, you know, in the 12 steps, we have, you know, I admit that I'm powerless over my addiction. That's the first step. And my life has become unmanageable. And then we have the second step. And that's, I came to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity. So after surrendering, and I surrendered only because I was beaten into submission. Me and my self-will and in my tamasic nature, I just left a battlefield of blood, guts, and broken bones behind me and crawled, you know, begging to help me. Yeah.
Wow.
The second step was, for me, the hugest spiritual experience that I've ever had, God experience, really knowing that there's a power greater than myself, and that power can restore me to sanity. Yeah. And what does sanity mean? What does sanity mean? Right? Sanity for me is, you know, if we're looking at Krishna consciousness, sanity is Krishna consciousness. Sanity is, you know, not is knowing, you know, when you're sane, you know that there's Maya and there's Krishna consciousness. Yeah. And so all these things, it was I'm very slow in all this kind of stuff. But when I get it, I'm in and I'm obsessed, like an addict. And I'm an addict for Krishna consciousness and for recovery. So
Wow.
I'm just like, you know, I'm going to go for it. So, and the third step is, you know, we gave our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand God. Now that's something, you know, all of these steps are not a one and done. Each step has 1,000 layers like an onion. So yes, I've surrendered 100% fully surrendered soul to the fact that I cannot use drugs and alcohol. I know this 100%. And Krishna took that away from me, the obsession to use. I don't have that anymore. So knowing this is so empowering. To know that you're powerless, it doesn't mean you're helpless. This is what a lot of people don't understand. There's a difference between being powerless and being helpless.
Interesting. I don't know the difference.
Okay, so the difference is this. This is how I always look at it. You're standing on the beach, and you see in the distance, there is a tidal wave coming. So you know for sure that this tidal wave is coming, and you know for sure that if you're on that beach, it's done. You're going on to your next life, right?
Yeah.
So a logical person would say, okay, I'm going to get out the Dodge and I'm going. So that's where you're not helpless. You're not helpless. You know that it's coming. So you need to go and you need to get out of there. So there's a big difference. You're powerless over that tidal wave. You can't say, okay, that's the tidal wave. No. But you can do things to get out of the way. And being an addict and fighting against my addiction is like thinking I can fight against the tidal wave, or I'll just surf it, or whatever.
Right.
We are not sane when we are in an addiction. We're in that tamasic, demonic world, and, I always thought that I was very connected, but I was so ignorant, so horribly ignorant. And I'm still ignorant. I still, I can only hope every single day that I can stay at the lotus feet of Krishna, because that is my only hope in life. That's the only hope that I have. There is none other, not for me. Surrender and service.
Right. So you said that I interrupted you when you were saying about the physics thing. You got into that.
Yeah.
And then what happened after that, in the sense of leading you up to Krishna consciousness again?
Right. Okay. So I spent. So after being a year and a half sober and clean, I met my husband, my first husband, and he was also clean and sober, also in the program.
And you got clean through NA and AA?
Yes,
Okay.
only NA and AA.
Okay.
But I was deeply spiritual and deeply believed in God. I just didn't have a name.
Right.
I was deeply surrendered, and I knew, because, basically the 12 steps of any of the programs is the absolute essence of bhakti.
We'll get into that for sure. Yeah. From BRG's, the 12 steps that you have written.
Yes. So, what was the question again? Sorry, I just got
like how you went from getting interested in the physics and all that stuff, and then how you came to Krishna consciousness.
Yes. Okay. So this is where it all really kind of started. So I was with this man for 16 years. And because I'm an addict, I'm also a codependent. And I am also an adult child of dysfunctional. Have that too at the Bhakti Recovery Group. We don't just deal with addicts and alcoholics. We are all there to help each other, from people who come from dysfunctional families, people who have been molested as a child, people who are struggling so hard against Maya or their compulsions. It's all in there. It's all in there.
Wow.
So, so I married a narcissist. And this was like, I don't know, these days they throw words around like this all the time, like diagnosing, he's a narcissist, or it's like a really like a modern term these days.
Right.
But I do have to say he was diagnosed as a narcissist 30 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So it's not like I'm not jumping on any bandwagon. It's not like he was a true narcissist, which is neither here nor there. That's his karma. That's what he has to deal with. Why was I there? And why did I let the things happen? Why did I let myself, I don't blame him. He's going to be that. I can't change him. It's the same thing. I'm powerless over him. but I'm not helpless, but I was for a long time until I wasn't. And when I finally hit bottom in codependency.
Can you tell us a little bit about codependency and what that means?
Sure. So codependent is basically, I can tell you what it is for me.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So for me, codependency is when what happens to me if I am in a codependent relationship is that I don't really even know who I am anymore. I basically give the responsibility of tough decisions. I give the responsibility of my emotions to the other person.
Right.
I also resent them. So it's a real double-sided sword for it, because so I'm the woman, they're the man in the relationship. And, you know, at one point, I wasn't making any of my own decisions. I always checked with him. And if he didn't like it, he would terrorize me until I changed my mind. And then I just didn't do it anymore. I just didn't. It became so dysfunctional, like almost like father and daughter,
Oh, I see.
always like this. It was not an even relationship. And the codependency for me was a lot of things. One is being addicted to a sick relationship. You just become addicted to that relationship. I lost myself completely, and I called it flexibility. I'm like, I'm cool, I'm flexible. And I am flexible. But the difference between being flexible and being codependent,
Right.
And so at some point I just always giving him, the responsibility. He wanted the responsibility. I gave him the responsibility, and he got pissed at me because he's always having the responsibility. And I got pissed at him because he's always taking the responsibility. And it's just this cycle, it gets really disgusting at some point. It gets very petty and disgusting. I held on to my program really, really, really hard during those years. I always tried to look at my side of things. And this was difficult because I was with somebody who gaslighted me a lot. So even if I was infuriated, I would try to find my part in it, to the point of it being almost like abusive, like he would do something wrong and I'd be like, okay, well, I did this wrong because blah, 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 and, I didn't know how to live a normal life at that point.
Right.
I had no idea. I was like, what do normal people do? I left school when I was like in 9th grade. I hated school. I hated it.
So you're dealing with the addiction, controlling the addiction through the programs, but then you had this other side of things with your relationship that was a struggle as well.
Yes.
Wow.
And so this is the thing. And this is the seed of addiction, dysfunction, obsessive behavior. It's all the same. It's all under the same umbrella. It's a whack-a-mole. So like I said, I'm completely surrendered to drugs and alcohol. I'm completely surrendered in that way. I've given my life to God in that way. I've given my life to Krishna in that way. But there are hundreds of layers of everything, and it has to go all the way back. And it probably goes all the way back to my past lives.
Right.
I'm carrying a lot. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to burn this karma off, So, okay, so I divorced this man after 17 years, the hardest decision of my entire life.
Wow.
Because it was like swim or die, because I got so depressed. I started to, because of our relationship, and not because of our relationship, because my inability to be able to find myself, stand my ground, because of my inability to be able to be strong enough to do that during that relationship, I started to develop obsessive compulsive disorders. I was cleaning the toilets 5 times a day. I was cleaning my hands. I was like, you could eat off my floors. It was just insane. Like nothing could be out of place. And I started getting really weird, obsessive thoughts. Like, I don't know, like what would happen? Like, oh God, this is so weird. I've never said this to anybody actually. And I'm going to tell this now to like everybody. I used to sit
You
there.
are, when you're saying that you're like all in on something, like when you do it, this is the
This is the
portraying
all in,
that.
yeah.
This is the all in.
So I had these thoughts of like picking up scissors or pens and just stabbing myself in the neck with it. Like, I know that sounds so sick. I know you're probably like, oh my God, who do I have here on my
No,
podcast?
what you're telling me is like absolutely fascinating. And now we're going into, who you are today. And that story is just so valuable. I think a lot of devotees can be, people might be suffering in silence, and they hear this story and they're like, this is exactly what I need to hear and how I can get help, and etc. Going into the BRG and all that stuff. But
Yeah,
please continue. It's really, I'm at the edge of my seat here.
oh, okay, great.
So you were
So
obsessive compulsive. You've developed obsessive compulsive things.
yeah, and like, yeah, the weirdest one was the shower in the bathtub. Like, if I even touched like a shower curtain was like, not you, like, don't even talk about a shower curtain. That would never come in my house. Like, no curtains that would stick on my skin during the shower. I would be like, ah, like freak out, I'm still a little bit like that. I don't like that kind of stuff. But in the bathtub, like bleach, Ajax, like three kinds of cleaning if I would sit in a bathtub.
Right.
But it's at one point I just stopped. I couldn't sit in a bathtub because anything with like water and germs was like, so, I really I stunted my own growth, and I denied myself a chance of finding out, who am I? Who am I? Who am I without the drugs? Who am I without my past? Who am I without this man? Without my children? What's my identity? Who am I? What do I want? I was lost, just lost. Because it was easier for me to fall in love with love than to honestly work on that part of my disease. I did work on that part of my disease with the drugs and alcohol, but not with the relationships. So it was frightening. It was so frightening to get a divorce because I didn't know who I was. No idea. And I fell into the deepest depression. Never had a depression in my life. I didn't even know what depression was. And I just saw it with my mom and other people. And I always thought like, oh, come on, pull yourself together. You don't have to be depressed. Like, like that's ridiculous. And so arrogant, so arrogant. And I fell into a deep, deep, deep depression. I lost faith in God. I lost faith in the world. I lost faith in myself. And I wanted to die. And I stopped going to meetings because I made it personal. I made it personal. And this is what we say in the meetings, is principles before personalities. And this is so true. Once we start, in German, we have a great expression. It's called Menscheln, which means like it's getting very human around here, which means you start to forget like why you're here, what you're doing. You start to get involved in the emotional part of things, and sometimes that's not very helpful. So I where was I now? I just lost my track. What did I say before?
You had got into depression, then you lost faith.
Oh, right. Yes, right. And I was playing music. That was about the only thing that got me out of bed, really. And my son, and I was such a good fake. I mean, I can just be like with my son, and I have a son as well.
Oh, wow.
He's 16. He's so amazing. Super brilliant. I love this kid. He's like a little yogi. So I was suffering. I was planning my suicide. I was planning how I was going to do it. And I was completely convinced that everyone in this family and everyone in this world would be way better off without me. I'm just a pain in the ass. Excuse my language. Sorry.
It's okay.
I'm just a pain in the butt for everybody. You know, they don't need to deal with me. And my poor kid, he's going to have to have a stupid, depressed mother like I did. And this was like the conversations. The committee in my head was just so loud. And so my band member, who was also my partner, because this was like about a year after we had split up, my husband and I, stuck with me throughout all of this. I'm to this day so grateful for him. Radhana Swami married us. Fast forwarding, yes.
Really?
So yeah.
Yeah.
So he didn't marry us. He was at our wedding.
Mm-hmm.
And he blessed it. So
Right.
So yeah, so I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do anymore. And with the last bit of shimmering hope that I had, I reached out to Kastuba because I kept thinking of the Gita. I didn't have one, but I kept thinking of it. And so I reached out to Kastuba. I didn't really tell him how depressed I was, but I just reached out to him. Tell him a bit of the predicament that I was in and that I wasn't doing great. And he made a commitment to meet with me online, and we would every week, once a week, and we would study the Gita together.
Wow. Did you know him? I know you knew him from when you were young, but like, did you lose touch with him?
Yes. And
so you just out of the
we
blue
had some contact on Facebook.
Oh, I see, on the Facebook. Okay, right.
Yeah, and I had seen when I'd written him that I also wrote him in 2012 or 2010 or something, and said like, "Hey, I have a Gita, and it's really kind of cool," or whatever. I don't know. We just said something back and forth, and that was it. And then fast forwarding, I went back and I was like, okay, so now I'm ready.
Wow.
Because for me, it was like this: if this doesn't make sense to me, and I begged, I didn't call him Krishna at the time. I called him God, and I said, God, you better show yourself to me now. If you do not show yourself to me, if this doesn't make sense to me, I'm out. And then all this crazy stuff happened. Like all these like miracles happened. It was so amazing.
Tell me.
Tell me.
Please. So you talked to Kastuba, you did weekly Bhagavad Gita classes.
Yes. And we did weekly Bhagavad Gita, and he kept like saying like, you have to listen to this guru. And I'm like, oh no, I don't want to deal with any of that. Like I was just like, no, I'm not dealing with this guru. Not right now. No, I don't want to deal with any of that right now. And but then I did, I just kind of got into it. And that was like an incredible story too, how that happened. That was just like insanity. So, so basically, I decided that, okay, I have to do something else as well. So why not do some yoga as well? Just because I needed some physical whatever, and it seemed to be okay, whatever. And I said, but I'm not ever going to one of those like sports studio, like, yoga, like that's not my thing, So I was like, all right, let me Google, and let me go like to the second page of Google and see what I can find. Because usually the ones at the top,
I love that.
Yeah, the second page of Google, because you get, sometimes it's like you get those gems,
Yeah, of course. I totally know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So I was like, all right. And then I found this guy, and his name was Michael. That's Michael in German.
Mhm.
And he was like, and he was like, yeah, I do it from my living room, and we do some Ashtanga yoga. And I was like, all right, cool. And I was really, really excited about this. And I thought, wow, it's going to be like the whole yoga's philosophy too. And it's going to be all this stuff. And it was on a Tuesday evening. And so I said to Krishna, I said, God, please let this be something that's going to be conducive to my, to my well-being. Please let this be something that I can hang on to, in these times of horrible trouble. So I get buzzed up to his house. I walk in, and there's a huge picture of Prabhupada, and he was a devotee.
What?
And it's like in Munich, okay? There's like, what are the chances of that, right?
Wow.
He was a devotee, and he had like a whole there were a bunch of brahmacharis living there. He had a bunch of roommates. There was brahmacharis. He had all the books. Like he had a whole book that you can just like buy books there.
Right.
And so what started, I said, are you a devotee? And then he was like, yeah. Do you know about Krishna consciousness? I was like, well, just a little bit. And then I just told him, and he was like, wow. So from that day on, I would come early to the yoga class, an hour and a half, and we would study a little bit and do some kirtan.
Wow. What's his full name?
Mishael, I don't know. Now his name is Mahaman. He's
Okay.
Mahaman.
Because I've been to Munich. I went to Munich with when Raghunath and Sachinandan Swami had a kirtan, had a yoga retreat in Munich. It was like 2016 maybe, or 17, and Raghunath was there, Sachinandan Swami, Jahnavi, Gauravani, and we went to some person's house in Munich who's a famous yoga teacher, tall guy.
You went to oh, come on.
Can't remember his name.
Anyway,
I'm thinking of that
great
because
guy.
really
nice guy.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. And then so you met with him, and then you started going there, and there were devotees there.
Yeah, and then I was like, okay, this is very clear, and every time like I prayed about something, it just Krishna conscious would just pop up, and
Wow.
so I just really just delved into it. I delved into the yoga. I delved into reading and all this stuff. And Kastu was like, come to New York, come to India. Like first, like, yeah, come to India. And I was like, nah, man, I'm not going to India, not yet. I got this to do and that to do. And then like another year went by, and then he was like, come to India. And I was like, I can't, man. And then he was like, well, then come to New York, because I want you to meet somebody. And I was like, okay, okay. And he was like, look, Radhana Swami is going to be there, and you have to meet him. You have to meet him. And I was like, okay, bet. I was totally ready. I was like, great. And I swear it was like a fairy tale. Everything was like a fairy tale. I still think of it as this like magical moment, like this magical time. So I when I arrived in New York, it was just like, went right to the Bhakti Center, and all of these people were so warm and welcoming. They were like, you're Jiva. I've heard so much about you. And they treated me with, I'd never been treated like that before. And everything was just totally easy. It was like, okay, so this is the deal. This is what we're going to do. So Tuesday, we're going to do this. Wednesday, do this. The whole thing was planned. I just did everything he said.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I'll do everything. He's like, yeah, then we're going to go to DC to this guy Gauravani's house, and Radhana Swami will also be there. And so I got I got this like darshan with Maharaj, right?
Right.
And when we had Darshan at the Bhakti Center, I had told him that I was doing this kind of Bhakti recovery thing. I was trying to do this AA meeting thing mixed with some Bhakti yoga. And he was like, and he said, he was like, that's been my dream for years and years and years. I want this to happen. I just want this to happen. This is something I've been wishing for. And I said, okay. And he was like, okay. I said, so what should I do? He was like, just keep going. If Krishna blesses it, that's going to happen. And so
that's amazing that he said that he wanted to do something like that.
Yes, this was
really very
his
interesting.
dream. But this is why Kastuba got us together. And I think this was the thing. And so, I mean, I think I'll ask him, or if he watched this, then he might tell me then. So yeah, while having Darshan with him, I was so nervous. I was sweating. My palms were sweating. I didn't know how to act. And every time around him, I'm totally flabbergasted. I'm always like, blah, blah, blah. I'm like the most confident person, but I'm sitting around him. I'm like, do the stupidest things, say the stupidest things. And I'm like, oh God, why did I do that? Right. So yeah, and we did we went to Gauravani's house and we did that, and it was just this magical time. And it was just amazing. It was just an amazing magical time. And it was if every door, it was not even like there was no work involved. It was just kind of like doors just opened and I just sort of like, whoop, whoop, whoop. I felt like, like one of those like Disney things where like the birds are chirping. Yeah. And the woman's like, ha, 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 ha. That's like, kind of felt like that, just like, phew. Yeah. Wow. So, yeah. So, and that's how I got that. That's really when it started.
Then you've just been connected ever since to the what's your connection there with Wisdoms of Sages? Because I know the reason I also when devotees contact me about you, I was like, oh, I did see something about Bhakti Recovery Group on Wisdom of the Sages. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so also Kastuba was very much wanting me to get in touch with Raghu, and he said like, yeah, he does these Bhagavatam classes online, and I was very fixated on Kastuba. I was like, no, I really don't, like, I need like right now just one person, right? And I didn't do it for like a year, and then when Kastuba joined and started doing it together, then I started to regularly come. Right. Grew to love Raghu very, very much, and so the pandemic hit. Oh. At some point Raghu was on the show and he was like, we really should have some sort of like Bhakti recovery thing, and I was like, I already have one, but dude, like maybe like Zoom, and I was like, I'll do it, man. I'll do it. And then it just started from there. And, we've got like it started, it's like what, 3 years ago now? The pandemic started 3 years ago. So it's 3 years. 3 years in the running.
But you said you were doing it in the sense of like, did you have other people who are a part of it already before that?
No, not really. I had other people who were in AA and NA who were a little curious with yoga. Oh, and I tried to kind of mix the bhakti, but it wasn't working. It wasn't working. Just wasn't working.
Oh, interesting.
And the idea was there. This is what I wanted to do, and Kastuba was very, very, said some very simple, profound things to me that made me think. He was like, look, Jiva, I know you don't have, because I was like, who am I? I'm just a stupid kid from New York. I don't, who am I to do something, He was like, are you kidding me? He was like, you've been in recovery for 20, like I've been in the program for 32 years, 25 years I've been sober and clean. And wow. And I worked that program. I can read all the books and I memorized it. It's in my head. It's deeply rooted in my being. And he was like, and that's your university, Jiva. That's your college.
Right. Let's talk about what it is.
Sure.
in the sense of first of all, what it is, and then what is the difference between that and like AA or NA?
Okay. So, so I found a need to deepen. For me, it started with my need.
Right.
It started with my need for three things. My need to serve others, my need to deepen my own spiritual practices, right? And my need to have sadhu sangha. Bhakti Center is 3,000 miles from here. I didn't have, very good experiences here in Munich at the temple.
Right.
And generally, I don't have great experiences at temples. I find I feel awkward inside a temple often. Not because I'm not insulting or never do something like that, disrespect anyone. I don't feel quite comfortable.
Right. Some people just don't. It's like a connection sometimes is not there for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I'm also kind of a person, like, if it's not here, I'll make it. If I can't get it, I'll make it. That's
Right.
just always been like my thing. It's like, why doesn't somebody make this? I'm like, I'll do it. Like, I'll just do it.
Yeah.
So those were the needs that I had, and also because Guru said it, right?
Mm.
Do this.
Yeah.
And I forgot your question.
The difference between just introducing Bhakti Recovery Group, what it is, and as well
Yeah.
as how is it different from just normal AA and NA?
Okay. So at a regular NAA meeting, SA meeting, which is Sex Anonymous, or SLA meeting, which is like Sex and Love Anonymous, or Adult Children. I mean, there's a meeting for everything, right? There's 12 steps for just about everything. And they're all very special interest-y, right? So if you go to an NA meeting, you're a drug addict, a recovering drug addict. If you go to AA, you're a recovering alcoholic. And there's a general spiritual program. But there's no specifics. It's like a Unitarian style type of deal. We don't share about who our God is. We don't share about that kind of stuff. And I found the need to say who my God is, and to be able to relate to another recovering person who's a devotee. I mean, that's so important, because that is the heart. That's the heart of the program, is the love, and it's the love for Krishna. The love for Krishna, and the deep desire to surrender and serve. This is really what it's about. So AA and NA. So it's a very complex question, because I would have to explain to you what NA and AA is. But if I can
I don't
really
think you need
just
to do that. I think what
Yeah.
your point is that it was AA is kind of more secular. There's not so much God,
Yes.
specific things
Yeah.
mentioned, but I think BRG is probably the opposite, right?
Absolutely. And
Mhm.
so I found that people who work the 12 steps have have a deep understanding of what surrender means, because we've been beaten into submission, most of us. And that is huge. I have to say, taking the lens of a 12-step program, approaching Krishna through the lens of the 12 steps, is something that brings the essence of bhakti, the essence of service, the essence of meditation, japa, whatever meditation you're doing, the essence of improving yourself, the essence of spiritual hygiene, and brings it all to some 12 simple steps, with, practices. It's all about the footwork, just like Bhakti. It's all about the footwork. You get what you give. That's what it is. It's seriously a mirror. So simplifying Bhakti for 12 steppers is important, because, having to study the Vedas and figuring all of that stuff out, that's years and years and years. And the other way around, when Bhakti is coming to the 12 steps, and this is the thing right now, if you don't have a 12-step lens, if you just come into Bhakti and you have these disturbing addictions.
Yeah.
Now let's take a brahmachari. That bar is really high. You're up at 2.
Yeah.
You're going, you're doing the morning program, you're doing everything. Yeah. And you got the 4 regs for a 19-year-old boy, that's difficult.
It's difficult. Yeah.
To say the least, and these days, pornography is free.
Right.
It's free. You can just get it anywhere, so that bar is really high, and that bar is a beautiful bar. But a 12-step program teaches us that we need to work our program, forgive ourselves, and keep striving, and it gives us a sustainable way to approach, a sustainable, practical, tangible way to approach the practical parts of spirituality. I don't believe spirituality is something up here. Spirituality is really a hands-on thing.
Right.
Being spiritual doesn't mean like, oh my God, I can think my way into Krishna's love. It doesn't work like that. You fall in love with Krishna, but then the honeymoon period is over. And then you're like, oh my God, I got to do my 16 rounds.
deal with the demons that may be there in the closet.
Yes. And so, sometimes lowering the bar, it's like this. So if you have somebody coming in who is an addict, who's a devotee, let's say someone coming in from the devotee community, they're an addict. They're hiding. A lot of them, a lot of people that we have, that other people don't know, but, they may be drinking, or they have sporadic, binge drinking, or they still smoke weed, or, whatever it is. We have people, even on methadone that are, devotees.
Right.
So it's, then we have just regular codependent people who have never touched a drug or seen a drug, but specifically those with multiple dysfunctions. And I don't mean dysfunctions in a societal way. I'm talking about spiritual dysfunctions. I'm talking about the stuff that keeps us away from Krishna. Anything that keeps us away from Krishna is dysfunctional. Anything. And if you have an addict mind, you're going to use anything you can. It's a whack-a-mole. So you got your drugs and alcohol under control. You for sure will probably be watching Netflix all the time, or this or that. And you're putting out fires, and you're putting out fires, and you're trying to do this, and you're chanting. You're reading. And in the middle, you're watching Netflix, and you're doing this, and you're going nuts because you can't recover. We need the space to recover. We need the space to be able to walk forward into Krishna consciousness with a sustainable way of doing it, because not everybody can do it. Right. They just can't. And there's no shame in the game. There's no shame in that at all. It's freeing to finally say, okay, the bar is too high, but I want to get there.
Yeah.
I want to be there.
This is really interesting. I want to ask you kind of like, a use case could be someone approaches this Bhakti Recovery Group, and let's say they have some type of, like, what would I what characteristics would I have, which I would say, okay, I need to be a
Mhm.
part of this BRG.
Honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, and a compulsion or an obsession to do something that you know is going to really mess with you.
I feel like we all have that.
Yes, but I've always said the whole world needs a 12-step program. The
Right.
whole world needs it.
Right.
It just needs it. But some things are tougher than others. We have people just there for cigarettes.
Who are
Every,
devotees.
every single person is valued. It's not like you have to be a drug addict. I think a lot of people shy away from that. Like, oh my God, like I'm not a drug addict. I never did drugs.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think
But
that's
I've seen people bottom out on codependency like you do not believe. People ready to kill themselves because they've so much pain,
right.
suffering from childhood trauma, from being from horrible, very not horrible. I don't like to say that. Very sick families,
Right.
who have given their dysfunction onto the others, and it gets in the way of their life, and it gets in the way of Krishna. Anything that gets in the way of Krishna is not useful. And
Interesting.
that's why working a program, having your sadhu sangha, keeping it green, knowing in the foreground, this is, admitting that we are powerless, not helpless, because we're here. That's why we're not helpless, but that we're powerless to fight that alone.
Wow.
You know,
So the person, like more practically, so the person says, I want to be part of BRG. Okay, then what happens? Practically what happens?
they just come to a meeting. All our meetings are open. Anyone can come to the meeting. If they want to stay anonymous, you just don't turn your camera on and say, it would be nice to introduce yourself. At least, you have to write on the board, like, I would like to stay anonymous.
So it's like a Zoom. It's like a Zoom.
It's Zoom. It's all Zoom.
Oh, it's all Zoom. Okay.
We don't have any in-person meetings yet.
Right.
We're getting there. We're getting there. That's
Okay.
that's the next
So
thing.
you're part of this meeting. You can be anonymous, and then what happens at the meetings?
So the format is very much like any other 12-step program, except for the fact that we read 15 minutes of 12-step literature, like this book. Like, that's what I do. Each meeting is different. We read NA literature in some meetings, AA literature in other meetings, ACA, that's adult children, Sex Anonymous, all of them. And the Sex Anonymous meetings are men. That's the men's meeting on Tuesdays. And then we read 15 minutes of any kind of scriptures from Prabhupada. So I'm doing now, or it doesn't necessarily have to be. I'm doing one from Chitta Swami now. I'm doing reflections from Chitta Swami on the Wednesdays. And when we're through with that, we'll go to another book. We've done Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction. We do the Gita. We haven't done the Bhagavatam. I do not feel qualified to do that. So we keep it just, simple.
And so everyone there is related to Bhakti. They've been introduced to Bhakti before. Is that right?
Yeah, mostly. And some just a little bit. Some people just they heard it on Wisdom of the Sages, or a friend told them about it. And so it's a mixed crowd. We have like year-long devotees, and then we have like newbies, and then we have like really long people in AA and NA who've just discovered Bhakti and are totally interested,
Do you ever run into issues with, okay, for example, if someone, you said years has been in Krishna consciousness, they might feel like the person who just got in contact with it doesn't have the same experiences that I have had. So why should I open myself up here or have some reluctancy to do that?
Well, see, that's the thing. We look for the similarities and not the differences.
I see.
So if you're willing to come and you want help, you have to be open-minded to come. Like, I'm definitely not the person to convince somebody. We're here and we're doing what we do. And, I do my service, and I would love for 1 million people to be at the meeting. But it has to be, and that's the thing, healing and recovery and deepening deepening your deepest soul to Krishna is something that has to be completely willing.
Mm-hmm.
The person has to be completely willing on their open to that kind of thing. Some people don't
And
like it. Some people think talking about stuff like that is just negative and they don't like it. I don't see it that way.
right.
I
remember because I lived at the Bhakti Center for a few years in the ashram, and I remember they were hosting AA meetings there. And I remember one of the things was that everyone would go around and say something. Is that also what they do?
Yeah. So, sorry, I got off on a tangent again.
It's okay.
I'm so sorry. Okay, so minutes of AA literature, then we read 15 minutes of whatever, and then we spend the last half hour sharing.
Mm-hmm.
So we share, we say, I usually just say, my name is Jiva. I am a grateful recovering devotee in recovery, right? And everyone speaks for 3 to 5 minutes, their experience, their strength, and their hope. We don't like to hear drugalogues. We don't like to hear sexalogues. We don't do that. We talk about what we read, how it relates to us in our lives, how we apply it in our lives, right? And how we can give it to the next person. Because if I keep that information to myself, it's useless. It's useless. I remember the time when I figured out why I was so freaking miserable, because I was selfish. Because what I wanted was to get better, and I wanted to see what I could get. What can I get out of a meeting? What can I get out of a meeting? And I couldn't get any more out of a meeting. It never dawned on me to say, what can I give? I always was a giver, but not like now. I'm born to serve. Like, that is the biggest joy of my life, is to serve. That's what I'm born for. Actually, I just had my charts done, and it said the same thing. So,
wow, that's cool. So someone who may be a devotee, they might think, I just haven't perfected my, my chanting or my following of the principles, and I'm getting there. So why would I need something like this when, in fact, they do need it, and this is so amazing, and I love it. But there's that philosophical thing where it's like Krishna conscious, sadhana, that will fix everything. That will fix everything. So why
yeah,
do we
until it
need this
doesn't.
type? Why would we
Until
need
it,
this type of thing?
yeah, until it doesn't.
Right.
I mean, until it doesn't. It's and it is like that. And that's the thing too, where I say, like, I'm like old school in that way, where I'm like, okay, so keep doing what you're doing. Come back when you're ready. Keep doing what you're doing. Tell me how that's working out for you. We encourage each other. We have so many WhatsApp chats. It's unreal. Like, we have like the Japa chat. We've got like Bhajan chat. We have, just the regular chat. We have the info chat. We have a codependent chat. We have women's chats and men's chats. So, we are a very close-knit community, and we are very open and warm, and we love to have newcomers. The newcomer is a very important person at every meeting, and it's safe. It's anonymous. We will not, like, what is in the meeting stays in the meeting. What you hear here, who you see here, stays here. That's what we say.
Right.
And everyone respects that.
Mm-hmm. How many people are part of the Bhakti Recovery Group right now?
So that's hard to say, because how it is also just in Bhakti. People come and go.
Yeah.
And especially when it gets to the real dirt work, when you're digging, a lot of people tend to leave because they don't want to do the work. And I get it. In our chat, we have 150 people in our chat. But I would say we have a steady group of 30 and a not steady group of another 20. So it's about 50 people who are there, and others who are just kind of, they just show up sometimes and then not. And, learning what they need to learn, feeling it out. I mean, everyone's free to come and go as you please. No judgments. We don't judge. We talk about our own experience, strength, and hope. There's no one going to be like, oh, you didn't chant your 16 rounds. Like, most of us are like, I can't chant one round without making offenses. Within the first time my mouth opens chanting, I make an offense because my head is somewhere else constantly. Fake it till you make it.
Right. It's my own lack of understanding of the 12-step program, but how does these meetings, especially I'm interested remote meetings, how does that help someone overcome their addiction?
So we work the steps. So this is a very specific program with a specific motive on working the steps and working these steps. So grab the BRG steps.
Yeah, I got the steps here. I can put it on the screen even.
Let's go through that. Let me put my like stronger glasses on. They're too big.
Share. Okay, here we go.
Okay, so this is basically what you would need to know. So the Bhakti Recovery Group leads the way into a newfound life. These 12 steps are the foundation of our program. Our experience shows that when we work these steps with a sponsor, come to meetings on a regular basis, help other sick and suffering soul, we do recover. We ask Krishna to help us fully surrender to this program and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. Now, what I mean is when we practice these principles in all of our affairs, that means, remember what I said before, we're in here doing this work, we're in a sadhu sangha, we go to temple, whatever it is that we do to connect, right, with Krishna. This program is not for the moment. This program is to take and practice in life, just like bhakti yoga, just like being a householder, right? We don't want to just be spiritual or we're at a meeting and talk about spiritual stuff. We want to take all of this and practice it in all of our affairs.
And I have a question here. What does this mean here? Work these steps with a sponsor.
Okay, so you'll see the steps underneath here, the 1 through 12. So a sponsor is somebody who has a longer time in the program as you do, somebody who has worked the steps themselves with their sponsor. It's kind of like a guru disciplic thing as well, in a way, and someone to take you through the steps. We have like step work guides. We go thoroughly. There's like all different ways of working the steps. So when we work the first step, it's basically we try to find out if we really have admitted that we are powerless over our addictions and associated behaviors and that our lives have become unmanageable. So by working with a sponsor, let's say you're the newcomer and you come in and you want to work the steps, you ask someone. So basically, there's always someone you relate to more than others, right? So it's always suggested same sex. So if I want, if I see someone in the meetings and she says some really great stuff and she has something I want, she has something in her recovery that I want. Yeah. This is the person I would ask. I would go and say, I really love what you're sharing. Could you please be my sponsor and take me through the steps? And if you're in the program long enough and you don't have like an amazing amount of like an overwhelming amount of sponsees, you have to say yes. You can't say no. You don't have to, but it's like our duty, to give freely what has been given so freely to us. So that's what that means. Now, whether, traditionally when AA first came out, the only like written step work was step 4. And this is going to be loud. But now, these days we have all kinds of step workshops and step work books for each step to go into them really deeply.
Oh, okay. So for example, the first step, we admitted we were powerless over our addictions and associated behaviors, that our lives had become unmanageable. So
Mhm.
when you're saying that you're on this, can you say like, I'm on the first step?
Yes.
Okay,
I'm
so
on the
then, and when you say making this putting this practically into our lives, what does it mean in context of this first step? Like, for example.
Right. So, I mean, not every step is going to be something that you can practice, but this one
Okay.
is.
Okay.
This one is. So, well, no, that's not true. You can practice all of these in your daily life.
Yeah.
So, when we admit we're powerless over addictions and associated behaviors and our lives have become unmanageable, it's very simple. It's very, very simple. How many times do we, let's say we've surrendered to the fact, we admitted that we're powerless over drugs and alcohol, right? We want to be loving people, right? So let's say that part is done, but we go out and we act like a jerk to people, or we road rage, or we do things. It's basically, we always have to admit that we're controlled by our feelings, controlled by our obsessions, controlled by our emotions, and that in that moment you're powerless to do something about it. And it makes your life unmanageable. It makes perhaps your life unmanageable with your, maybe with your main addiction, you know, the life unmanageable, you know, like I would say, like, in my early recovery, I road raged a lot and didn't really make my life unmanageable, but I was definitely powerless over that. It just ticked me off, you know?
So would it be that you're kind of becoming more conscious of
Yes,
what things are making your life unmanageable?
absolutely.
I see. Okay.
And when I work with my sponsees, I tell them to write a list about stuff like that. What did you experience today? We take like 1 week. What did you experience today? Where did you act like you didn't want to act? Where were you not the person you wanted to be?
Mm-hmm.
Where did you feel completely helpless? Where did you feel that you know, that things were out of control? You know, and then we and then we get to that, and then further and it just goes on. So the thing is, if the first step is not done, that's the foundation. The others will not help. It's in the way, this is the most fundamental step, because your program will be built on this. How much you are surrendered.
Mm-hmm. And so, okay, this is I mean, like, each of these are like, you can explain it. You can, like you said, it's you can peel it back so much. They're very
Yes.
fascinating.
Onions.
Yeah. Um, for example, number 4 made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Now, practically, what does that look like practically?
So that looks like you make a list of people you have resentments with, because this is the big thing about resentments. Resentments will get in the way of our spiritual life. Resentments is poison.
Mm-hmm.
They're poison. So let's say I'm mad at George. What did George do? George stole $10 from me. I mean, this is an example, right? And then you have the next box. What did it make me? How did I react? How did it make me feel? And then what my part in it was.
Oh, I see.
So you will see that a sponsor has been around for a while. What we're looking for is, what I'm looking for with my sponsee, is that red string that goes through all of it. I'm not really looking for the details and really what happened. You'll always see there's fear and anger. You'll always see that under all those things, actually it's fear of not getting what we want, or fear of losing something we already have. That's usually behind everything on the 4th step. And that kind of stuff creates bad resentments. We hang on to them, you know, that hasn't, resentments haven't been, resentments are something that is deadly for an alcoholic. It will get you out there drinking again.
A resentment will
Yes.
get you out to
Very dangerous. That's why we really need to. This is like purification. This process is a purification process. So we admit we're powerless. We admit also that there's a power greater than ourselves in step 2, Krishna for us in BRG, and that power can restore us to sanity, right?
Yeah.
Then this is a really important one. The third one, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of Krishna as we understand Krishna. So this means you can do this every day, every second of every day. If I make a decision, it's not one and done. That is definite not one and done. If I'm going to make a decision to turn my will and my life over to Krishna, I could do this constantly. The moment I say, I'm planning, I want this, I'm going to do that. We could do that and we can act on of course, but we have to also know that we are not the drivers here. Krishna we're not the drivers. Krishna is the driver. So, yeah. And
then
we say
let's go through the other ones, like the way you were just doing that. I love that.
Okay, good. So now we're at the 4th step. So it's practiced from the first 3 steps. It's called we came, right? In the first, we came to, like we woke up in the second, and then we came to believe, which is the 3rd step.
Right.
So now you have that kind of basis, this 1, 2, 3 basis, which is like, it's a little practice. We're doing this, we're becoming aware, we're trying to give our will life over to Krishna. You feel like you're hanging on to something. No, wait a second. No, I don't want to hang on to this. I can do the footwork, but I'm not responsible for the results. The results are up to Krishna. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So then we make a 4th step, which means this is a cleansing process. We just talked about how that is, right?
Yes.
And the important thing is our part in it. And we want to see the commonality in every situation, because there's always going to be one character defect that's constantly, one trigger. It's always like 1 or 2 triggers. The whole thing is just 1 or 2 triggers for each person. Excuse me. The 5th step, we admitted to Krishna, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. This is like confession. So we take the 4th step and we go through that with our sponsor. And our sponsor listens. And as a sponsor, you're you're looking for those commonalities in their 4th step. And it's important because those are the things that are going to trigger them. And this is the cleansing process. We need to cleanse those things. We need to see what our part is in it. We need to see how we can act differently. Like, oh, okay, here the situation's coming up again. I'm starting to feel angry. Why?
Can you give a simple example of that?
A really good example would be a family matter. Okay. So let's say you're going to your mom's house for dinner and she starts nagging at you again. And it's something that you've experienced over and over again. You flip, you break a pot, you do something, and you storm out of the house. So before something like that happens, you've done the 4th and 5th with your sponsor. Your sponsor has told you, okay, you are resentment with your mom because she does this and this and this, and this triggers your this and this and this and this. So when we know what's triggering us, we tend to think about acting differently. But that comes with the other steps. You have to work the steps first in order for it to really work.
Wow. That's amazing. Okay, interesting.
So now we were entirely ready to have Krishna remove these defects of character. So this is what they say, this separates the boys from the men. So there are a lot of character defects that we don't want to get rid of, right? There are things that we don't want to get rid of. There are things that served us or that we like, tamasic somethings, whatever it is, So when you're entirely ready to have Krishna, remove all these defects of character, you're basically just opening yourself up and saying, okay, purify me,
Mm.
you know.
And all the steps led to that.
Yes, because we've
Previously of that.
looked
Yeah.
at them, we've addressed them, we've talked about it with someone else.
Right.
We did it in front of God. We did it in front of our sponsor. We did this. We got shame out of the way. We got guilt out of the way. We looked at our triggers. We did all this. And now we're taking all that ugly stuff and we're ready. Our hearts are ready to have Krishna remove that from us. And then we have the 7th step, which is we humbly ask Krishna to remove our shortcomings, which means being ready and then asking him to is a very different thing. We become ready. And then we start going into detail with each one. So this means when we get in, this means for almost every one of us, thick-headed addicts, when we humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings, it's usually after we've done something stupid. And we keep seeing this pattern of like doing this stupid thing over and over again. And the only way we're going to be able to, we don't know what we don't know. So if we're knowledgeable about what's going to make us act in a certain way, right? That's when we become not helpful. That's when we're not powerless anymore. We're not helpless anymore. That's when we can address the issues and go farther. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now this is really great. Now here we go with the real cleansing stuff. Okay. So we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. So this could mean so much depending. I mean, it's also like, depending if you're like a junk, if you were like an addict, a recovering addict or a recovering alcoholic or codependent. A typical one for an addict would be like, I stole like $1,000 from my mom or something like that, right? So you have to make that list of every person you harmed, every person that you feel guilty about, any person that you've done wrong to, even if they've done wrong to you. Doesn't matter. Your part in it. And we learned that in the 4th step. What is your part in it?
Right.
Because most of the people who are on your 4th step will probably be on your 8th step as well. So,
wow.
Yeah. So, yes. And this is the thing. A lot of people get very scared of this step. Most people are terrified of this step.
Yeah, because you don't want to. So the person might not even know, or right. Sometimes it's like they don't even know
Absolutely.
that you feel like that's towards them or something.
Right. And that's why, and that's really great you said that, because this is just the list. And then you go over the list with your sponsor or someone you trust, and they will tell you what's a go and what's a no-go. So we have the 9th step, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others, which means, let's say Harry slept with Bob's wife. No one ever knew except for Bob's wife and Harry.
Right.
He's not going to go to Harry and be like, I'm sorry I slept with your wife.
Right. That would cause more harm.
That doesn't work. You can't do stuff like that. You have to figure out how you're going to deal with that somehow, or and there's certain things like if you stole from someone who's now dead and you can't give them the money. And let's say that person died of breast cancer. So the money that you owe them, you donate to a breast cancer organization. That's kind of how we do that.
I see.
So 10, we continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. So this is really great. So this is sort of like the continuation of a 4th step. At the end of the day, we take a little inventory, a mini one. We say like, okay, today, dog, I spoke rudely to my husband or whatever, and then we promptly admitted it and apologized, So here's also a big one. This is the 11th step. This is sought through prayer and the chanting of the holy names to improve our conscious contact with Krishna, praying only for knowledge of Krishna's will for us and the power to carry that out. And that's what I was talking about before with the third step, right? The third step of saying, okay, I'm going to give my will and my life over to Krishna, right? Here, you're doing that through prayer, through meditation, through all of that stuff. And you're praying not for what you want. You're praying for what Krishna wants for you, and that you get the power to carry that out. You're not praying for a lighter load. You're praying for a stronger back for whatever Krishna is going to give you.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Then we have 12. Having had a spiritual awakening, and as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to those seeking recovery and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. Yeah. And then I can just finish with this, but this is going on for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, this is great. I feel like this could help. I have a follow-up question, but let's do this first.
Okay.
I guess we can summarize this. This is just something after the 12 steps that it explains a little bit more about that.
Yes. It's kind of like when you come into the BRG, this is kind of what
I see.
This is what we do. This is what we are.
I like this idea. We are born into this body with this diseased condition. This is our karma. We are not responsible for our disease, but we are responsible for our recovery. We fully accept this fact and work with what we have been given.
Yes.
I think a lot of this has to do with just a lot of like acceptance and like being conscious of these. That I really love the taking inventory thing. I think that's really valuable. Because I think a struggle, or maybe something devotees might have a hard time understanding with this is like, oh, this is only for people who have had Jiva's story, like
not
like this like extreme, amazing extreme story, but this is not for me. But I think that's not the case, right? Because this is like
not.
So can you just kind of tell me, why is this for people who are not just your case, but for even other things?
Because it gives us a chance to grow spiritually in a kind and loving way at the pace that's right for us, and gives us the chance to have tools to learn to stick with Krishna, and to learn humility. Everybody needs humility.
Yes.
To learn acceptance. Everybody needs acceptance. To learn that we are not our character defects. To learn that we like to strive to be better people. To learn that we need to do service and give these things farther to other people who are sick and suffering. And that real love of Krishna starts with surrender.
And someone who may have been initiated in the movement for 30 years, they can still take part in this, because this can plague anybody. It's not that if you are a devotee for that long, you're automatically like exempt from addiction or something that maybe, like you said, something that's keeping us away from Krishna.
Yeah, absolutely. We're either walking towards Krishna or walking away from Krishna. It is kind of that simple, and I'm saying all of this stuff, and I wrote all of this stuff,
right?
But I'm not perfect.
Sure.
I'm a BRG member too, even though I was inspired to do this. It's not like like I'm talking like from a podium.
No, I don't feel like you are. I don't feel like you are, but thanks for, clearing that up. But I don't feel like you are. I mean, your whole story is just like amazing that you've been clean 25 years, and now you're helping other people to do that. It's just really, I'm in awe, to be honest.
Wow. Yeah, it's all Krishna, not me. Really. It's funny because I hear something often like, oh my God, you came out, you worked so hard, and you came out of this, thing, and you just pulled yourself up by the whatever and blah, blah. and I appreciate everyone's appreciation to a certain degree, but it's kind of like, I feel like I'm getting patted on the back for running out of a burning building, which every sane person would do at some point. It's like, like, yeah, I ran out of a burning building, of course, like,
Right.
and, Krishna was there. So it's not me,
Yeah.
but for the grace of God, there I am. That's it. Nothing more.
Wow. Do you want to say anything more about what's on the screen here before I take it off and ask you some other questions? Anything else to
No,
highlight here in these two paragraphs, perhaps?
Which ones?
In the last two paragraphs, anything else to highlight?
I would say, you read We Have Taken Birth in the Age of Kali. We're especially, did you read? No, you didn't.
No,
read
I
that.
didn't. I didn't read that. We can read that.
Okay.
We who have taken birth in this age of Kali are especially prone to the never-ending pursuit of material sense enjoyment in its extreme. Repeatedly, we continued this cycle of insanity, expecting different results. Bound and blinded by Maya, powerless over the threefold miseries, we ran around life trying to fill that God-sized hole with material sense enjoyment. But the results were always the same: pain, devastation, and for some of us, even death.
Yeah.
It's like our philosophy. Like, this is all our philosophy just put into like a really, I feel like, an attractive way people can kind of relate to if they're struggling with something. And I think, and everyone's struggling with something.
Yeah, absolutely. 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 It depends on the person's want and need to get better.
Mhm.
No one's 100%. Nobody.
Yeah.
And even if it's only 2% missing from being completely realized,
Yeah.
there's still room.
Yeah. What are your future goals with all of this? Like, what's on the horizon?
Okay. Great question. The horizon is this. I would love to be able to have in-person meetings all over the world, everywhere. Encouraging people to start in-person meetings at their local, wherever they are. It's a bit difficult now. Well, it's a bit difficult probably because we have so many people spread out all over the world. We have people tuning in from India, from England, from Germany, from New York, from Cali, from New Zealand, from Australia. So we've got like little bits everywhere, but we don't have like a cluster of people in one area. Not yet. So getting that out. I'm writing a book now too. So
wow, that's exciting.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. It'll be a very similar book to the Narcotics Anonymous book as far as the structure goes, and probably around that size, something like this. And to serve Guru. I want to serve Guru. I want to serve. This is, Radha Swami says, this is a dream come true for him, and I want to make that dream come true for him. I want to make that dream come true for him.
Amazing. I want to ask you one last question about someone who may be a devotee and they might feel ashamed to bring up these things to someone even in the group. And I know you said it's anonymous and there's all that stuff, but still there can be some real shame in these issues and keeping them quiet and stuff. So what would you say if someone came to you and said that? I'm a devotee for long time. I'm a long time devotee, but I can't join this because my reputation's on the line, or I feel ashamed about things.
You really want to hear my answer to that?
Yeah.
It's a little bit fresh.
I'm all for it.
You can't save your face and your ass at the same time.
Wow.
That's probably what I would say.
That's something people need to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, come on, it's, if you really want help and you really need help, then you're going to go get that help. It's not like you can sit there in the ocean drowning, choosing the color of your lifeboat. Like, oh no, that one's orange. I don't want that one. And I don't want that. At some point you're going to eat so much dirt that it doesn't matter what you're going to look like at some point. You gotta, if you're surrendered and you want help, you'll do anything. Anything. And even if you're not at that point, all you got to do is, like I said, all we need is to be honest, open-minded, and willing. So what I would say to the person that's maybe in between, who's not maybe suffering as much as someone, having that horrible bottom like I did, I would probably just tell them, just come. You don't have to speak. You don't have to say anything. Just come and listen. Come for at least 10 meetings and listen and see what happens. And then you can judge. But, you don't have to delve in right away. Just come and hang.
Right. This also brings it to my mind, like, we may see devotees all the time, but people may be like fighting wars behind their face of just,
Totally.
happy, Hare Krishna, this is good. But behind the scenes, like, so much going on.
Yeah.
That's why I think this is so important also. Like,
Yes.
it can help them with that, that war that everyone's fighting behind the scenes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would really love to give that service to the devotee world, to our movement, because I see so much of that. And I also see so much of suffering and shame, and there's no reason to be ashamed, and there's no reason to suffer.
Mm-hmm.
Pain is inevitable, but suffering is definitely a choice.
Yeah.
You know?
Another thing that was brought to my mind is, I know, like, the shame can be like if someone's initiated and has made someone certain vows and they're not able to keep their vows. I know that I've read letters from Prabhupada where Prabhupada knew someone had done something wrong or had done something bad, but he said, no matter that you did that or whatever, just try to do better. And there was not this like black and whiteness of like, okay, now you're bad, and now you're not part of our movement, and you're horrible person, etc. I think there's a certain awareness of devotees that need to have that, like, okay, you may be initiated and you may have done wrong things, but that doesn't mean that you're a horrible person. It just means you're a human, and we've all have our, like you said in those paragraphs, we're diseased. And
welcome to Kali, man.
Yeah,
dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm so honored to meet you. This has been a
I'm
fascinating
so
talk.
honored to meet you. You're so sweet. You're like this pure, sweet soul.
No, I'm not. I'm not. So for those of you who want to get in touch with Jiva, I just want you to tell us a little bit about, I know there's some retreats coming up, as well as your how to get in touch with you, website, etc. So let's start here. BhaktiRecoveryGroup.com. This is your website of how someone can get in touch with a recovery group.
Yes. There's a meetings list there.
Okay.
And by the way, all the meetings are free. We don't.
Oh yeah. I was going to ask about that. Okay. Amazing.
And the retreats also is donation based. Everyone's responsible for room and board. It's not like, and I host these retreats.
In-person retreats.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And the first one is at Super Soul Farm by Raghu, October 4th through the 7th.
Oh, wow.
4th through the 7th.
And that information's on this website?
Yeah, it's getting there.
Okay.
It's on my Instagram as well. You can look at Bhakti Recovery Group Instagram.
Instagram handle, Bhakti Recovery Group, for those listening on just audio, at BHAKTIRECOVERY Group, Bhakti Recovery Group on Instagram.
Yes.
Awesome. And then you also have JivaGCoaching.com. Tell us a little bit about that.
I do. Being a sponsor is often really not enough. And then some people really need to be able to delve deep. And a lot of people also, most of my clients come to me with unmanageability in their lives. A lot of attention deficit, like myself. And I've worked through a lot of that stuff, lived and worked through all of that. Sour relationships, codependency, all that kind of stuff. And, people having drinking problems who don't like AA or big group meetings. There are just some people who don't find their recovery. And so they come to me and I coach them. you know.
Wow.
And yeah, that's just like my business, my private business.
Okay, cool. Wonderful. Well, it's been a pleasure. I mean, we're almost hitting 2 hours. I didn't think it was gonna go, but this has been just so fascinating. I feel so inspired and enlivened and just relieved that there is something like this that exists, and this is all to your credit. And I really, really appreciate what you're doing. And I'm hope that you grow it exponentially and just scale it huge and help all the devotees and help just people who are suffering, all devotees who are suffering, because I know devotee, just because you're devotee doesn't mean you don't suffer, but like you said,
Absolutely.
give you a stronger back to face what may be coming your way or what you're dealing with at the moment. I think that's so a lot of amazing stuff that was said here today. So if you want to get in touch with Jiva, please check her out on Instagram. I'm sure you can just DM you there, Bhakti Recovery Group.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Jiva, again for joining.
Thank you so much, and please, this is all glories to Prabhupada, all glories to Guru, and to all of you beautiful people out there. That thank you so much.
Stay on. I'm just going to turn off the recording. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.